everyone, Shewan's the name. I'm from Wybong Action Group. I particularly would like to commence with an acknowledgement of country. We are standing on stolen ground. Today we stand in the footsteps millennia old. May we acknowledge the traditional owners whose cultures and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture this land since men and women awoke from the great dream. We honour the presence of these ancestors who reside in the imagination of this land and whose irrepressible spirituality flows through all creation. That's my acknowledgement of the traditional owners. Thank you. Okay, Wybong Action Group. We're amalgamated or associated with a range of groups. We all face similar problems here in the valley, such as the Maryland Healthy Environment Group, Wildlife Protection Alliance, Road Conference, Single and Healthy Group, and the Communities Network, and others. This presentation will deal with both coal seam gas extraction and also with the coal industry. The reason we're all here really isn't to do with the industries per se, it's to do with climate change. And if we look, 350 parts per million is the recommended atmospheric concentration of carbon. At this point in time, we are in excess of that, and currently in excess of 392 parts per million. On that trajectory, catastrophic climate change is around the corner. The methane, atmospheric methane, as you can see, up until 2005, plateauing off. From 2005 on, a massive increase in atmospheric methane. Methane is calculated by some at being 23 to 25 times that of the equivalent in carbon dioxide. So it is a much more dangerous gas in greenhouse terms. For those who don't believe in the science of climate change, there are some graphs here which show global average temperatures, here calculated over an extensive period, in recent times increasing. Also, graphs that calculate land temperatures, surface temperatures and water temperatures. And again, we see an increase from the 1970s on, which verifies the theory of climate change. Global warming since the 70s has been more rapid over land than over the oceans, as would be expected from increasing human-caused greenhouse effect. These are all footnoted. I won't read through the entire slides. Methane, as we can see, 25 times that carbon dioxide on a 100-year global warming potential. Currently, methane forming 16% of the contribution to the greenhouse effect. We can also see in the graphs to the left-hand side the substantial increase in carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxides. These are the conventional gas basins. As we can see, the Cooper gas basin near exhaustion. The other gas basins essentially for export, not for domestic use. The characteristics of natural gas. Essentially, it's composed of a range of materials. There's the methane, propane, butane, pentane, other hydrocarbons, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide. It's not pure when it comes out of the ground. It needs to be vented, and the other gases are vented to the atmosphere. There is shale gas in Australia. It has been attempted to be exploited in the late 40s. It remains to be exploited fully. The gas industry, like any other industry, just like coal, they go for the easy pickings first. So conventional gas will be exhausted, Then they will go to the next cheapest extraction, coal seam gas, and when that's exhausted, then to the shale gas. We have here the coal seam gas locations in those particular reservoirs. At this point, not fully tapped and largely untapped. Some diagrams there indicating on the left-hand side, just a little bit more detail on the spread of the coal seam gas basins, and on the right-hand side in the northwest of New South Wales. You can see the extensive coverage of licences across the northwest of New South Wales. Here we're looking more at the Upper Hunter area in particular, and again, substantial coverage by licences. I wonder if there were any licences left to issue. We have here petroleum titles in the Upper Hunter. As you can see, Singleton and Muswellbrook, you'd have to say near 90% coverage with existing licences. The only areas exempt from coal seam gas extraction are the wilderness areas. Various of the national parks are still open to be exploited at the Minister's discretion. The methane in Australian coal seams is essentially as a result of microbial activity within the water which is contained within those seams. A coal-eating bacteria that infest the seam whenever water is present. So of course the dewatering of the seam to produce the gas or to encourage the gas to migrate to the surface also removes that bacteria, and so the creation of further methane within the seam diminishes. Particularly in relation to Wybong Creek, we have had some surveys recently finished there, and we discovered in Wybong Creek a disjunct between the flow in the upper section and the lower section, such that in the lower section of that creek is independent substantially of any flow from the upper, and the lower section is substantially fed from the coal seam which outcrops into the creek. So any injection, for example, of brine back into the coal seam aquifer potentially could impact and raise the salinity levels enormously in that very productive section of the lower Wybong. Also, as the seams are dewatered, just as occurs in the coal industry, spontaneous combustion can occur. Compared with the conventional gas, CSG projects can generally develop at a lower capital cost because the reserves are typically at a shallower depth. Now, we have had discussion of the differences between the American situation with shale gas and the Australian situation. In Australia, the seams are much shallower, and so they are easier and less cost involved in exploiting those seams. And despite what we heard yesterday, the extraction of CSG necessarily involves the taking of groundwater. The amount of gas present in the coal seam has some dependencies. Thickness and the extent to which the fracturing system within the coal is interconnected. Water is pumped from wells, the gas flows. As water production declines, the gas production increases. However, the production from the well needs to be continuous, so any halt to that production, water re-enters the seam and the process needs to recommence. In general, the Australian Permian coal seams are relatively high in gas content at shallower depths, much shallower than those exploited in the United States, which does present the problem and the potential, it heightens the potential for interconnectivity between the coal seams, which are being exploited, and the groundwater aquifers. There is a risk that when you fracture a seam, rather than being contained within the coal zone, it may extend into the aquifer above. It is a science, hydraulic fracturing, and if you get it wrong, then there is the potential for the fractures to grow far beyond the coal seam itself and up through the associated rock. There's also, if that were to happen, the potential that methane will leak into overlying aquifers, such as that used for drinking at your house. To give you an idea of the quantities of fracking fluid, one Queensland gas seam operation, 18,500 kilos of additives, and up to 40% of that remaining somewhere, presumably in the coal formation, but perhaps not. That's migrating elsewhere. The natural gas, according to Howth from the Cornell University, and this does refer to the shale gas. However, it can be applied, I believe, to the Australian situation. The natural gas obtained by that technique of hydraulic fracturing may contribute significantly to greenhouse gas emissions and really should not be considered as a clean alternative to coal or oil. And we will see a comparative graph later. I prefer this diagram to the simplistic ones which have been offered. As you can see, it clearly identifies that there are aquifers, not necessarily in straight lines or whatever else, but you can see the fracturing has the potential, if there's over-fracturing, to interfere with the aquifers above, particularly when the Australian aquifers are shallow. The seams are shallow. There's also no guarantee that the intervening rock between the coal seam and the aquifers above doesn't turn to, at some stage, be gravels or other permeable materials. When you core an area, you can't have any certainty beyond, I would suggest, a few hundred metres that the strata remains the same. The Cornell University study shows on a 20-year time frame the footprint for shale gas is markedly higher than it is for coal. And on a 100-year time frame, it remains higher, or very similar to that of coal. Which begs the question, why would one consider creating an industry which has other associated problems, particularly with produced oil, and the risk of interference with groundwaters, when it is no better, potentially, than the coalage, than the solid coal. An estimate of salt, which wasn't able to be given by our previous speaker. Each megalitre of CSG water brings up between 5 and 8 tonnes of salt, previously stored safely underground. I would defy anyone to go and get the produced salt and sprinkle it on their dinner and expect to live a healthy life as a consequence. I can assure you that the salts which are drawn from the coal seams would also contain salts of various substances that would be quite toxic to the human or animal system. The massive pressure and multiple frackings that are used during a gas well's lifetime increase the likelihood of the failure of casings and groutings and the opportunity of the pollution of aquifers. Fracking is a violent process. And just as it fractures the coal seam, it also has the potential to interfere with the casings and the groutings which supposedly secure the security of the upper aquifers. There are some examples there of things that have happened in the States. Horizontal wells. We've heard how wonderful it is that you can laterally bore, and instead of having 6 wells in a pad, you can go 2.8 kilometres, I believe, at the current time, and you have less wellheads. Well, it's all very wonderful, but the horizontal wells are much more likely to encounter existing faults in the rock formations, and so they enhance the opportunity of groundwater interference. study there demonstrating that groundwater near fracking operations has higher methane concentrations. Although some fracking fluid remains in the wells, about 30 to 70% are discharged as wastewater and need to be treated or dealt with. The waste can be essentially so toxic, and there is a reference there, and concentrated it's very difficult to dispose of. The standard wastewater treatments cannot handle the chlorides, total dissolved solids, organic chemicals, bromides, fracking fluid chemicals, radioactive elements, like they are more prevalent in the shale gases, in the shale seams than in the Australian seams. There's a study there indicating there are high levels of radiation. There's another study there indicating problems with wastewater treatment and the disposal of that wastewater into streams and rivers, producing elements and chemicals that simply cannot be removed from the water and which are toxic. We've heard Graham speak about the wonderful benefits, the same wonderful benefits that come with the coal industry. Well, I assume you'll be able to read through that, but the industry promotes job creation and local investment, but they don't take account of the long-term economic damage. Many economic benefits are a mirage. They don't generally buy from local businesses. You get out of town roughnecks in short-term jobs, fleets of trucks that damage the roads, drilling rigs 24/7. The lovely view that you have becomes a lovely view of gas wells and compressor stations and pipelines and roads. Most of the economic gains are short-lived, as Graham has suggested. The construction crews go away and very few people are needed to then continue to work these particular industrial operations. You have the pipelines, which cause a potential safety hazard. There have been explosions in a number of American towns and cities causing death. Of course, farmers sell up or they lease their land out, or their cattle die from drinking the fracking or the waste-produced water in the unlined ponds if they manage to get in. Also the toll on native wildlife, but not very easy to get out of a plastic-lined pond. And so the toll on native wildlife is quite enormous. Organic farmers, if there's any pollution to their land, well, they lose their certification and there goes their livelihood. For example, this is from June or July this year, Arrow Energy. 10 years they've been there. Well, this should be a well-established, easily run, no problem operation. But it started spewing methane and water up to 90 metres high. Fourth incident in recent years. The landowner was restricted to his movements around the property so as not to become a statistic. And of course the government are informed. And this is very similar to the Orica business where the government are informed. But what about the people who live in the surrounding area? Are they informed? The government seems to be more concerned with that the community has confidence. Well, as we've discovered with the Upper Hunter mining dialogue, the community's confidence is so shattered in these corporate industries as to withdraw their social licence to operate. Australian gas, where is it going to go? Majority of it for export. Very little of it to be used in this country. Methane is not the only problem. There's the health and water contamination. And of course the community pays for those costs while the shareholders, the corporations, they bank the profits. Coal. Well, this is what you can expect if you allow coal in the Upper Hunter Shire. we know in the Muswellbrook Shire that currently covers over 50% of the rateable land mass of the Muswellbrook Shire. And over 70% of the Muswellbrook Shire is under lease. So, look forward to this. You didn't get it at Bickham, but that doesn't prevent you from having it somewhere else. Of course, the dust which we breathe in the Upper Hunter is due to the wood fires that many homes simply don't have. It's certainly, I don't know, it's not dust rising from those pits or into the distance filling the valley, or obscuring the view of the township of Muswellbrook from Mount Arthur, just a very short distance away. And where is the coal going to go? Well, you can see the Australian consumption of coal diminishing slightly, while the export increases dramatically. The net mining royalties. Let's look at how beneficial this is in terms of the community being rewarded for allowing its resources to be utilised by foreign corporations. Mining royalties in New South Wales, 2008-9, that's the most recent figure I could come across, 1.3 billion. Sounds good. We'll see how good it is shortly. Let's have a look and see the major producing area for coal. Looking at that table there, the Hunter far outweighs any other part of New South Wales, which you would expect, given that it is substantially in the Muswellbrook Shire a coal mine. And how many people are employed in that industry? Well, in 2007 and 8, in the Hunter, it employed 8,000 people. I think if we were to ask, or to take the numbers employed in agriculture, we would find, and certainly in agriculture, viticulture and the equine industry, the number would be dwarfed. The coal mines are not a major employer, and certainly they are not a major employer in Muswellbrook Shire of local residents. Now, we have, as a result of the World Commission on Environment and Development in Australia, come up with terms such as ecologically sustainable development. And through the Protection of the Environment Administration Act sections, we are required to take into account precautionary principle, intergenerational equity, conservation of biological diversity and ecological integrity, and to fully price pollution. Polluter pays. The users of goods and services pay. That doesn't sound like New South Wales to me. Certainly, in terms of intergenerational equity in the Muswellbrook Shire, where is the intergenerational equity in 80% of the Shire being open cut strip mine? To anyone who is born in the Muswellbrook Shire, there is no intergenerational equity whatsoever. A sustainable community. The cemetery contains the sustainable community of Muswellbrook. Ecologically sustainable development, economic prosperity. Fraud and false, these are not taken into account when the government makes these decisions. And yet they are required to, this document being from the New South Wales State Plan. One would expect also that local government authorities are also required to make decisions in accordance with these principles. Let's look at the external costs of coal. What are the external costs of coal? They are costs to health, costs to the environment, and so forth. These are not charged within the coal price. They are not paid for by the consumer of coal, nor are they paid for by the producer of coal. Remember that figure, 1.3 billion, was the royalty collected in New South Wales in that year? Well, the health cost burden alone in that year was 950 million. Is the rate and the sacrifice of the biota of the entire Hunter Valley only worth $300 million? When we add in the full external costs, these are figures from the New South Wales government. I don't think the politicians read their own material. If we include the costs as a consequence of burning that coal for power, $3 billion. The coal industry, we are paying the coal industry to destroy our health, destroy our land, strip our resources and export the profits. The external costs of the various technologies. Well, there are two there that we can forget. The carbon capture and storage. That's a technology which even the federal government is moving away from. It simply, at this stage, is technologically not feasible. There are some external costs associated with the renewables, but they are nowhere near the external costs associated with the coals, or also with the combined cycle gas plants. Certainly, as Graham has suggested, and as the Germans have taken it up, in a country which has 40% the solar resources of this country, with rooftop solar, the distributed grid, and people having control of their own essential use of electricity and their own power bills. But here, because we are driven by the corporation and the representatives of the corporation who we elect, because that is the only choice that we seem to be presented with, we end up with centralised grids that centralise profit and maximise costs. What are the invisible poisons from coal? They've been identified by the Singleton Healthy Environment Group. These are the minerals, or these are the elements that are emitted from power stations and coal mines that are in that dust, they're in that wood dust, that wood smoke that we're breathing. And if you live here long enough, that will be your demise. Certainly, in the Muswellbrook area, the instances of autism is enormous. It could have something to do with mercury, if only the federal government would permit the studies to go ahead. We also have enormous problems with asthma with our young children, school-aged children, and we're all aware of the statistics in Singleton from Dr. Twinehour. These are all as a consequence of that wonderful employment and benefit generating industry, the coal industry. Well, let's look. They're going to buy you out. Where are you going to go? This is a dated diagram, but it does show you the extent to which licences and titles have been issued throughout New South Wales. I do note the ACT seems to be a mineral-free zone, as one would expect. But certainly, there won't be much point trying to go up the coast or anywhere else. We've already seen the petroleum titles covering the entirety almost of Singleton and Muswellbrook, and everywhere, state reserves, conservation areas, everywhere other than wilderness. And that is only because of international treaty obligations. Coal mining titles in the Upper Hunter, again, over 50% of the rateable land mass of Muswellbrook Shire, the green being the conservation areas, and substantial concentration, particularly around Campbellville, which is about to be destroyed, should that be the will of the New South Wales government, and the people there forced to leave their homes, so that for 7 years, some 12 million tonnes of coal over 7 years can be extracted, and then they can return to their homes and to the destroyed lands that they leave behind, should they so wish. Mind you, all of that takes no account of something called the Greater Eastern Ranges Biodiversity Project, which is the Australian contribution on a continental scale to the problem of climate change and global warming. The New South Wales Minister and the New South Wales legislation in relation to coal title and gas title has no regard whatsoever to this project. I would suggest that this defies the constitutional arrangements or the constitutional requirement of laws being for good government. certainly more for government, for the corporation and the shareholder at the cost of the citizen. It was suggested by one of the speakers at Camberwell that perhaps that person would have more rights were they to get on a boat and find their way to Christmas Island. Here we have the Greater Eastern Ranges focus area in the Upper Hunter, essentially along the Wybong Creek leading up towards Bunham. We have this area here that's already taken out by the Mangold mine, and of course we have three large voids there covering a substantial number of hectares, and I'm sure that the migrating animals on their escape from climate change will be looking forward to drinking the heavy metal laced saline waters. It'll probably be their last stop. But certainly no regard whatsoever in petroleum leases and in coal leases for this initiative. Now, we need to realise, going back to this diagram, that in the area from the Victorian Alps up through Queensland to the Atherton Tablelands, in that entire 5,000 kilometres, the area most denuded of vegetation, the area where the biggest gap is in that project, or in the vegetation between areas, is the Hunter Valley. It is the most cleared part of New South Wales, and it's not enough for the industry, and it's not enough for the minister. Perhaps they need to be told by the citizens of this state that enough is more than enough. Yes, we're almost there. Okay, well the next one to go is that was the Anvil mine atrocity, and this overburden dump will gradually increase in height so that we can't see the natural landforms behind it. It seems to be a specialty of Musselbrook to eliminate the landforms. Next coal crime is the Ridgelands lease area, which was tendered out by Mr McDonald with no regard whatsoever to any other department or any other person, on the basis that there's coal there, let's flog it. Well, these are some of the features of that particular ELA. Poor Jackson Fig there, over 200 years of age in the former reserved area. Well, won't be there once the miners get in. This is the area looking towards Bunham of the ELA. Some of the TSC listed, EPBC listed ironbark spotted gum complexes on sandstone soils. This should be a video, but very short. If it, no, it isn't going to work. It would have given you just a quick view around that ELA. Clearly the intention, you can read there, the subsidies given to these, to the coal industry, 12, 13 billion in Australia. The Australian and New South Wales governments cannot be serious about reacting to climate change. If they were, we would not be in this situation where we are going to mammothly increase our emissions by opening more and more coal lines and the coal seam gas industry expansion. Over 50% of the increase in Australian emissions from 2000 to 2010 wasn't as a consequence of you or I using more electricity or emitting more greenhouse gases. Over half of it was a consequence of the opening of new coal mines and the expansion of the coal seam gas industry. The governments are not serious. We are being taken for a ride. There are some recommendations here. I won't go through them to any great degree. Industry policy that needs to change in order to avoid catastrophic climate change. It's no good to say, oh, look, we're not going to do this until somebody else does. Well, I'm not going to stop bashing my wife until the guy next door does either. Well, let's get real. Somebody has to move. And other countries are moving, and the Chinese are moving rapidly away from the things that we are going to export to them in a very short term, to the destruction of other industries. Some other policies there in relation to taxation and subsidies. This industry, coal industry, and also coal seam gas industry should work on the same footing as every other industry. They should not be exempted from water acts, native vegetation clearing acts, or any other acts that are not applicable, that don't apply to other industries. Special treatment. For what purpose? There needs to be changes to health policy, transport and taxation policy, and specific recommendations for the Upper Hunter, Wybong Creek and Goulburn River catchments, which all, of course, come into the Lower Hunter. New South Wales legislation, essentially, it needs complete review. But both the Mining Act and the Petroleum Act are outdated, they are obsolete, they do not serve the needs of the citizens of this country, they serve the needs of corporations, and they are to our detriment. Given the amount of licences already in play in New South Wales, there is no need for any further licences to be handed out. I would be surprised if there is any resource left that isn't covered by a title or a licence tradable amongst these corporations. There should be an immediate moratorium, not 3 months, not 6 months, but until these acts are revised in full, including their regulations and all other associated acts. Now, the corporations will of course say that it's the end of the world. Well, it is not their asset. It is the community's asset, and the community grants them the right for a price to act and to use these assets. Well, surely the community has the same right to withdraw the use of these assets without the need to then be forced to pay compensation. But certainly, there needs to be no new titles issued either for coal seam gas or for coal. These are the people who over time have assisted in putting together this particular presentation and various other presentations. Wybong Action Group is a big family. All of our groups are one part of a very big family. This is our choice. What are we going to choose? What are we going to leave in terms of intergenerational equity? Are we going to leave nothing? Are we going to rape the interior of this country and everybody cling to the beaches until they decide there's rare earths in the sand? We have to choose now, and it's up to our representatives to make those choices on behalf of the citizen, on behalf of the taxpayer, on behalf of the unborn Australians, as to what future we are going to leave our children. At the current time and at the current rate of exploitation of the resources in this country, we will be Nauru before we know it, once the richest people on this planet, and today begging for a detention centre to keep their economy alive. Surely we will have learned and should have learned, and our politicians, those who represent us and what we want for the future of this country, they need to start to say to corporations that wish to rape this country and export the profits, leaving behind the disasters, that the answer is no. Now, we always hear it. Well, if we don't open this next new mine, they'll only open it in South Africa. Well, let them. Let them destroy South Africa if that's what the South African people want. But my understanding is, and I'll finish up on this, that Australian citizens do not want the rape of this country to continue. They have seen enough of the corruption and disgrace of the previous government in New South Wales, and we want to bring it to an end. And if this government does not bring it to an end, then the citizens may well bring this government to a premature end. And that may be at the call of the governor. It's entirely up to our representatives to act on our behalf and put aside whatever biases
and predispositions they may have towards corporations as opposed to Australian resident citizens.